Y'all know what's going on. It's time for another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker. Check this out, y'all. Juvenile crime is a problem everywhere. Everywhere. Every day, somewhere in the United States, juveniles are being incarcerated for various different crimes violent, non-violent, you name it, they're doing it. And statistics show in most cases, somewhere around 90% of juveniles that are incarcerated, they have a parent in prison. In this episode, I'm going to share with you a story about a father that got out of prison and almost immediately had to deal with the prospect of his own son going to prison. He's coming out, his son possibly going in. He's trying to figure out what he can do to change that and how he can be there for his son and a better father for his son and help his son. But the prospects are dire. It is what it is. But I'm going to lay out some things to you that I think a lot of people may not have considered when it comes to juvenile crime and the things that go on and influence those juveniles and what we as a community can possibly do about that on our own without waiting for lawmakers to come up with something while they haggle with what to do in the legislatures all across the U.S. Real consequences are taking place. Victims are being created, and juveniles, their futures are being lost to the prison system. It is what it is. So we have to take matters into our own hands in a way that's proactive so that we can help our kids avoid this lifestyle. You know what I'm saying? So just sit back, y'all, relax, and I hope that this show is informative to you. All right, y'all, here we go. Got this father, man, this brother that got out of prison. He did somewhere around 8 years at 100%. That means 8 years, day for day. No good time, okay? For violent offense, a violent offense. He got out, and I'm talking about the whole time he was in here, he was one of those guys. You know what I'm saying? He was making his money. He was doing his thing. He was calling home every day too, talking to his son. Still talking to the guys in the streets. The guys in the streets still talked about him. You know, talking about how he was one of those dudes. He took care of his business, hard hitter. You know what I'm saying? Metaphorically speaking, didn't take no mess off of anybody. Didn't take no mess off of anybody. But during his incarceration, he started to realize that mindset, that path that he had chosen was the wrong one, and he didn't want that for his son. But the whole time he was in, his fiance, he wasn't married, but his fiance, she kept telling him that their son was going down the wrong path. And he would talk to him on the phone, and he would tell him, don't do this, don't do that, listen to your mother, listen to your grandmother. You know what I'm saying? The things that you're doing are wrong. And he wanted him to change his life. Now, his son would tell him that he's doing what he's supposed to do. He's making decent grades in school. He's listening to his mom. He's listening to his grandmom. But all of that was a lie. All of that was a lie because his mother was telling his father the opposite. And they didn't really know what to do. So prior to the father getting out of prison, he learns that his son had been implicated in a violent crime. And that if found to be indicted for this crime and tried for this crime, it was a possibility that he would spend some time in prison, not juvenile, but prison, because they would more than likely try him as an adult. So release day comes, and the father gets out of prison. He's released from prison. Everybody's happy. Life is good. And when he gets home after the party, the next day he sits down and talks with his son. And that's the hardest conversation that he had. he talks to his son and he asks him, he said, why do you want to go down the path that I was on? Why do you want this life? And his son was like most juveniles. He really didn't know what to say. He really didn't understand the question. It wasn't like he wanted this life. It was like he wanted to be able to do the things that he thought were fun, running the streets, staying up all night, sneaking in and out of the house, selling drugs, making a little money here and there, whatever. You know, because most juveniles, when you think about it, y'all, they're not just trying to just do any major things like take over the world or take over the drug game. They're usually selling drugs to buy tennis shoes, go to concerts, wear nice clothes, maybe help mom out here and there or whatever's going on with the household. But they're doing it to fill a gap. They're doing it to fill a gap. At the time they jump in it, they're not usually thinking lifestyle. I'm going to do this long term for the next 20 or 30 years. That's not what you're thinking when you first start getting it when you're a child. You're thinking about the things that you don't have and the things that you want. And this is a way to get it because I don't have to worry about going to work and going to school. I can do this and go to school or do this and not go to school. But most of the times, at that young age, you can get a part-time job that's not going to pay a lot. It's going to take you away from your friends. They want to be able to do something that keeps them with their friends. And a lot of times that's doing something collectively, illegally, doing it together. And the easiest thing they think it is, from watching TV, from watching the guys in the streets, from listening to the music, they think it's selling drugs. They think all you got to do is get the product and there it is. And it's so easy to get the product to sell that it's no problem for a juvenile, a child, to get involved in the dope game because there's always somebody out there willing to put them out there, willing to give them that first pack. So with their situation, though, they wanted to be the type of individuals, him and his friends, they wanted to be the type of individuals that took something, robbers. So that took a lot of craftiness, figuring out who's going to be where, when, best time to attack. And they did it. But in this situation, somebody got hurt real bad. They didn't die, but they got hurt real bad. And the evidence is pointing towards this young man and his friends. Now, situation is this. They're looking for a situation, they're looking at a situation where they might have to, somebody's going to have to testify. Somebody's going to have to testify against the other. That's what they're looking at. And this young man and the rest of them are saying absolutely not. They're not going to be branded snitches. So what do you do? How do you deal with this? So this young man is talking to his father. And his father is trying to tell him the God's honest truth about this lifestyle. And he's not listening. He's not receiving it. Because, now this is what I want you to pay attention to. I remember when my son told me when we were sellers, this is a little joke for all of y'all that might not know who I'm talking about. I'm sure you do, though. I remember when we were talking one time when we were sellers, and he had learned about the books that I had written and stuff like that, right? And he said, nobody ever told me about this side of you. They told me about the street side of you, not the business side of you. Never did that come up, even from my friends. So he gravitated towards the side of what people told him, the criminal, the bad guy. He wanted to be just like Daddy. And now, in this situation, it's the same thing. He's out in the streets, not in the streets, on the streets. And he's hearing from people that are in the streets. Man, your daddy was a hard hitter. Your daddy was this. Your daddy does that. Now, for an impressionable young man, and let's do the math here. He's 17, going on 18. His dad has been gone for 8 years. That means he was around 9 or 10 when his daddy left. So that pivotal time between 9 and let's say 12, 13 years old, he's hearing all of these stories about his pops. The person that he's missing, the person that he's going to visit to see, the person that he's talking to on the phone, the person that he wants to be like. He's hearing that his father is a hard hitter. And he has this reputation in the streets of being that dude. So guess what he wants to do now? He wants to be like Pops. So he starts to develop these traits, these behaviors that are more in line with the reputation that he's hearing about his father. And he passes this on to his group of friends, convincing them that, look here, this is what we have to do. We can get some money doing this too, y'all. Next thing you know, they plot, they follow, they seek out somebody that's not much older than them, and they end up robbing them and almost killing them because they didn't get much of anything. And now they're facing charges. But I want you to focus on why he thought this was the route. Because he's hearing all of this negative crap about his father. True stuff, but it was all negative. Didn't nobody tell him that his father loved to read books. Didn't nobody tell him that his father wanted to be an engineer when he was growing up. Didn't nobody tell him any of those things. But they told him that his father was a street dude. They passed this negative nonsense on to him, and now he wants to be that person too. Now here's his pops talking to him. He understands where his son is coming from because he was almost identically influenced the same way. People telling him about his father being in the streets. But see, now he wants to break this cycle of evilness, this cycle of bragging on the nonsensical. He wants to break that. So he tells him, he said, look, everything you hear in the streets don't mean it makes sense. At the end of the day, he said, when you go up into that penitentiary, all of the stuff you heard people talking about in the streets, that means nothing. That goes out the window. So this is what the pops did. Now, this is what I want you to think about your situation if you have a child that you want to try to influence the other way. You may not be able to do what this father did, but I want you to look at the effort. Not necessarily what he did, because we all got to deal with it a different way, however we can deal with it. But I want you to look at the effort. Pay attention to the effort that this father, recently released from prison, put into this to try to get his son to understand. So this is what he does. He calls the prison, and he asks the warden, could he please get a special visit in the prison? Not a special visit, but a special permission to bring his son to the prison so that he could see what it's really like in there. So he could introduce him to some of the people that influenced him to leave that lifestyle alone. And now listen to me. This normally wouldn't happen. Because they are very reluctant to let a person that's gotten out of prison come back into a prison setting inside of a year. But this warden, this system that this brother called, they were so impressed with his effort that they said, yes, bring it. And what they wanted him to do, what he asked him to do, and he wanted to do, he wanted to know if he could take him to the very cell that he spent those last 8 years in. Well, one of them, because he moved around a lot within the prison, but the last cell that he was in. And they said, sure. So this is what they did. They cleared the cell out. They cleared the cell out. The people that were living in, they moved them somewhere else just for a day. It's not any big deal. So they allowed the young man to be brought in by his father. He's walking him around. You know, they have an officer escorting him, introducing him to people. This is that. And these people are sharing their stories with this young man. And you could see on this young man's face that he's not hearing. He's not responding. He's putting on. Got this hard look about himself. He's putting on. That's okay. Because they know he's going to break down. They going to get him. So he takes him around to the chow hall. He sees everybody in the chow hall sitting down, talking, some not talking, but everybody's looking and wondering what's going on. Now, this is the moment. He takes him to the cell. His father knows that this is where it's going to happen. Because in this cell is where he had his hardest moments. In this cell is where he could let his guard down. And he was relying on that ambiance, that whatever it is inside these cells that makes you and breaks you. He was relying on that intervention. He was relying on that cosmic intervention to take place. So they went into the cells. And the cells got 2 bunks, like bunk beds. And you got these green mats on each bunk. They're not posturepedics, y'all. I'm telling you. And you got this steel toilet in the cell, and you got these shelves where all your stuff goes. You got a smaller shelf for your hygiene, the bigger shelves for your clothes. Right? So they go in the cell. The officer shuts the door behind him. The young man turns around and looks. So what is he doing? He said he's locking us in. This is what happens during lockdown. When you go in the cell is locked behind you. And it was something about that sound of the cell shutting that ignited something, it triggered something in the father. It brought back all of those old memories, those old feelings. And the father told his son to get on the top bunk. And he said, I want you to lay down on this bunk. I want you to feel what this is like. So he got up there, he's laughing, he laid on the top bunk, and he said, why are the mats so hard? He said, that's how they are. And the father laid down on the bottom bunk. And then this is hard, y'all, what I'm about to say. And when his father was on the bottom bunk, his son on the top bunk, they didn't talk. Nobody said a word. But his father started to weep. And his son rolled over and looked down at his father. And he saw this big, strong man. This man that had done 8 years. This man that had a reputation in the streets of being a hard hitter, crying. He saw his father crying. He said, what's wrong? He said, this is not what I want for you. He said, you don't understand. Inside this cell, this is hard to do. He said, I was away from you for 8 years. And now you're on the verge of being taken away from me. All because of the decisions that you've made. Nobody made you do what you did. You did that on your own. Ill-advised as it may have been, you chose to do this. And he said, you might have to spend the next few years of your life in a cell like this. And he said, in this cell, he said, that broke me. He said, it didn't break me as a human being. It taught me that all of those things that I thought meant something, meant nothing. And he said, I wanted to teach you that. I didn't want the sale to teach you that. But it looks like this might be your future. It looks like this is the only way you might get it. So his son, looking down at him, his eyes started to water up. So his daddy, being a daddy, he raised up, told him to get down off that bunk. And he hugged him, and they both stood in the middle of that cell crying. And that officer standing at the door, he started crying. He's looking at him. Because he knows, dude, he spent 8 years in here with him. So he knows his change. He knows the pain that he's experiencing right now. He knows it. So the son is crying and he says, I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm sorry. And he said, you don't have to apologize to me. He said, that man you hurt, your mama, your grandmama, the people in the community that want you to do better. He said, that's who you need to apologize to. So the officer popped the door, let him out. On the way out, they were talking to the different guys, and now he's open, he's receptive, he's listening to what they're saying, and he's telling them he's going to do better. On the way out, they meet the warden. They shake the warden's hands. The warden tells him, look, he said, I hope you don't come this way, but if you come this way, we'll do our best to look out for you. But do your best not to come this way. You don't want this life. Listen to your pops. So they leave. And on the way home, driving home, it's pure silence. Ain't no talking. Everybody's quiet. So his daddy said, well, what you want to do? He said, I want to go apologize to my victim. So he told him, he said, we can't just drop down on him like that. So he called the DA. His daddy called the DA and asked him, could they come in to talk? He took him in to talk. And he told the DA that he wanted to apologize. Now, the DA, being the DA, was trying to get some information for the case, but he told him that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to apologize to him. And they can do that another time. So he made arrangements for the victim to come down to the DA's office so he would feel safe. And he talked to him and he apologized to him. He apologized to his mother. He apologized to his grandmother. He even apologized to his friends and told them that he had misled them. They were looking at him like he was crazy. Like, nah, all we got to do is keep our mouth shut. He said, nah, it ain't about that. He said, it ain't about that. He said, we got to take responsibility for what we did. Now, this all happened, this turnaround happened in a few minutes, y'all, inside this cell. And it was because of the effort that his father had put into it. It was because of the effort that his father put into it. He went to the extremes to try to break through to his son. But at the end of the day, it worked. Now, his son and those other two guys, his friends, they ended up getting probation. So they are part of the system, but they didn't get locked up. They got some time to do on paper. But if they stay out of trouble, for the next 8 years, they can get that expunged off their records. But if they get in trouble, they got to go to prison for 8 years. Starting the day of the incarceration, the trouble. It's 8 years. It's not however many years they've done on paper and then they go in and finish it. No, they got to start at 8. So I said all of that to say this. You know, we got a lot of kids out there that are getting in trouble. And I don't know which program that you might want to get them involved in or which program that you might want to use to try to break them. But do something. It takes you to do it. It takes you to do it. You got to look here. People don't listen to you. People don't listen to you unless they know that you love them and you care for them. You got to do it. Most of the times, you're not going to listen to people in the system because you know those people in the system don't know you. So they don't necessarily have that genuine connection to you. But that father loved his son and the son knew it. So he was open to whatever his father wanted to do for him. Whatever his father was trying to use to get through to him, he was open to it because that's Pops. And we have to do the same thing. So if you're a father in prison, man, stop it. Stop it, man. You know this is not what you want for your child. Quit stunting and being selfish. And if you out on the streets, I say the same thing to you. Quit stunting and being selfish. That's all this is. It's a selfish lifestyle. And if you do want this for your child, shame on you. Shame on you. And woe unto you. Because you're going to answer for that. You're going to answer to a power way higher than the courts, buddy. Believe that. Believe that. This has been another episode of Doing Time with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Baker, and I say peace, y'all.